Tab bars are very common on iOS as the top navigation method. They're mostly used for smaller devices like the iPhone or on the iPad in split screen. And in this video, I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how you can use them in your own app, where you would use them and how to customize them. I will show you how to make this screen where we have a tab bar with 3 tabs. I also show you how to change the background color. This is now available with iOS 16. You can also change quite a bit about the styling of a tab bar. For example, in this case, I used a page style. So you get per default these 3 dots then in this case. You can also customize them. And then you can swipe. And it's paging, so it's always snapping into the next page. This works if you have a small amount of views that you show in this case. If you have a lot of longer one, it's probably better to, in order for still having the right performance, to go for a scroll view. And now with iOS 17 you can actually do this. So then you can also do paging and view-based paging. But what you see here is available with TabView, also for lower iOS versions. Another very good example for tab views is actually for onboarding screens. So the first time my app launches, I want to show a sequence of onboarding screens. In this case, there are 3 screens. You can swipe to go to the next. Down here again, we have the dots with the background indicator. But I also added the possibility to programmatically go to the next page. So we have a look at how to programmatically change the tab selection. And then on my last screen, I want to say I'm done. And we leave this. In this case, I used a full screen cover, but you could also use a Z-Stack or sheet on macOS. As you see, there are a few examples for TabView, and I'm guessing most iOS apps use them in some form or the other. So now let's have a look at how to do this in SwiftUI. I will start with a very basic example where I use text in my tab view. So you can use a tab view, and I'm using the content initializer. So everything that I put in here will become one of my tabs, or the views that are shown in these tabs. So this is a first tab and then a second tab. Now I don't see my tab bar down there because it would only show this if I actually have tab item. I simply made the first tab really large. Okay, maybe I use a little bit of a different color. So this is the first tab and the second one. This is the first view and the second view. Now in order to actually add this tab bar items, I need to attach the view modifier tab item with label. Label has a text and an image. For this example, I start with a system image. So this is first. And then I use something like one dot circle. And now it appears down here. And we can do the same for the second tab. Now the tab items use the accent color, depending on what you put in. I didn't define anything. Let's just try with purple. And now this becomes purple. The reason why the other one is, now it looks like the other one is blue, but it's just opaque. I am going to take away the frame mode. So you see, you have either the accent color or a gray color. Instead of system icons, you could use only text, but I don't think it looks very good because it usually tries to place both items. You could either use an image only or text only or label. If you try to put anything else, it will just ignore it. So I guess the best looking design is with a label. If you don't want to use a system image, if you want to use your own image, you can do this. For example, I added here just a dummy icon. This is a PDF. And what I did is here under image sets render, I set this to template image. In this case, it uses I used here transparent image too. It uses the black or the visible areas for coloring and it ignores the rest. So let's use my test icon. It's not very pretty. Label with image. And now this image is used here. And if I tap and go back, it is also colored in the right way. Okay, my background colors here get a little bit crazy. Just going to remove them. The thing with the icon is they need to be in the right size. You can read about this in the human interface guidelines. They tell you how big they're supposed to be. I didn't manage to resize it. I was hoping it would automatically resize, but I can't make this. Now that we have this part, I like to use here a little bit more interesting views instead of just text. That's why I added here a home view. This is a list. Typically you would have on the very highest level lists with navigation links. That's why these arrows are here. This is the one view I want to use, and the other one is a settings view, where I use a form. Okay, now I can use my home view and my settings view. The list is now grayed out. This is because I have navigation links, but I didn't add any navigation view. Typically, you would have as I have here, a tab view on the very top in an iOS app. And then for each of these tabs, you can use navigation views or navigation stack view. So I use the newer navigation stack for my home view. And I also actually need to add a navigation destination now I need to check what I used for value food. So this is my food type, food.self, food, and then I can show my food detail view. It's a very basic example of a navigation stack. Now the list looks like I can tap. I can navigate in here. The interesting thing about this is if I navigate to a detail view and then I change the selected tab and I go back, you see it keeps the state of this tab, which means it's actually not, usually would expect that from a memory footprint point that as soon as I change, it throws away the other view that it doesn't need anymore. But with tab view, it's different because you want to allow the user to go back to the point where he left off. Especially in the case here where I actually have a settings view. Maybe the user navigates very deep in the stack and then wants to change something in the settings, appearance to dark. I didn't connect this to anything yet. And then they want to go back right where they left off in the first tab. So that's why they need to keep the state of these tabs around. This is the special thing about tab views. Now the other thing that I have here some more content in my tab view. You see that my list is actually filling out everything, and it is also filling out to the point where it goes to the tab bar. In this case, you see actually the background of the tab bar. It's a little bit transparent. If I scroll down, it disappears and blends in with the background. This is a system behavior, which we can actually override. I will show you this in a minute. If I go to the settings view where there's not a lot of content, you don't actually see this bar background in the divider. This is also sometimes confusing for me because then I don't see is there actually a bar or not. But it's just a system behavior of showing the background or not. Now you can add as many tabs as you want to. And I'm going to show you how this system adapts, because you can imagine if you put more at some point it doesn't fit anymore. So let's test this out. I have my navigation with the home view, then a second tab, a third tab, a fifth, and my settings. So we are now at 6. And down here, I get my first, second, third, and fourth. And we have now a different one, which is the more tab. Basically, it says it stops at 5. If you add more than 5 tabs, it uses the first 4 tabs and then collects the other ones in the last one. That's why now here I have a list with my fifth and the settings. And so now here I can go to the settings. This is adapted for larger screens. So if I go for the iPad, now there is actually enough space for 6 tabs, and it's actually showing here the settings then as a separate and also the fifth. In compact mode, only 5 tabs are allowed. This is for the iPhone or also on the iPad in compact. Most of the time you probably wouldn't use a tab view for the iPad. A lot of the times they use the sidebar, so the navigation split view, but it's perfectly fine to also use a tab bar. Now I'm going back to only my 2 views because the other ones are just dummy ones. I already touched a little bit on the appearance, and now I'm going to show you how you can customize this. And the first thing that we are using is the predefined styles, the tab view style modifier. You can add this around a tab view style. And we have the automatic one, this is the one you see now, and the page. Now it's probably not very visible. Down here I have 2 icons, and you can swipe to go from between these tabs, and it actually highlights which tab is shown with the icons. Probably this is more gimmicky in this case. And you can hide the page index display style by saying I don't want to show this. And now it's disappeared. You can show your own indicators too. This is probably not the best example for this page style. It's definitely not the right situation to use this. So let's look at something more interesting. I want to create an image gallery for swipe through these images. I have here 3 images as an example. And in an array, I have the images that I added to my assets. So this is this 3 images. And now I want to change the display to show them in the horizontal scroll view with this paging behavior. So it's a little bit weird to use a tab view in this case. At first sign, I'm going to embed this in a tab view. Now this will use the same default behavior, but I want to use something else. So I use the tab view style page. And you can say always or never. Let's use always. It's a little bit too high. So we can add a frame height of 250. It uses we don't use the tab bar anymore. We get this page indicator. I said here use this always. You can also change it to never. Where it disappears. It's probably not a good idea in this case because my users wouldn't know they can actually swipe. So I rather use the always case. Paging means it's snapping into the next page. This was one example where we can use this paging in the image gallery. And the other one is for the onboarding flow. I already prepared this a little bit by adding a onboarding page, which consists of a image. So I use one of the system images for now. I make this pretty big to fill out the space. Then I add a title and a description text. And I also want to show a button below. This is for programmatic navigation. If you press here next, it will programmatically move on to the next page in my onboarding sequence. The reason why I have here 2 different buttons is because at the first couple of views you show next, and then in the last one I want to show a different text in the button, which is let's get started. And in this case I would actually hide the whole onboarding sequence. Now here, in order to make this a reusable view, I say I can put in a different image for each of these pages, a different title, description. Depending on which page it is, I can say it's a done button or not. And the action that is performed when I press on this button here, we decide on one level higher. Now I want to create this onboarding sequence, and here in this onboarding view, I currently only have 1 page. And I wanted to have multiple of them in a tab view. So again, I use a tab view. And I need to add multiple of these pages. And now I again have to add the tab view style with page index display mode of always. You can't see the dots because they're white or semi-transparent. In the other example, with the image, you can see this because here I have this white dots or semi-transparent dot. Now you can add a background to make this still visible of index view style and then showing always the background. Now down here we have this nice background with these 3 dots. And when I swipe, these dots are animated and changed. As you saw, we had this tab bar, now this paging. And you can actually remove the background. I just wanted to show you that I'm not really sure where you would want to use this, and never showing the page. This works if it's really, you can hide the paging or the bar. But in this case, don't do that with the navigation stack, because then also my title here is lost. Actually, I should probably add a navigation title, food. And now it appears here. I guess you shouldn't use the combination of navigation stack and hiding the tab bar. But for example, with my image here, if you wanted to have a custom animator which shows which of this image is selected, you can just say this to never show and then show your own indicator. What is interesting for our main content view here is to change actually the background color and the customization of this styling. You already saw that the foreground color that is chosen here is used from the accent color in my asset. just to make it consistent also, is this, which means that it's the same one as the toolbar buttons here. But what if you want to change the background color? Now with iOS 16, you can use the toolbar background with visibility in 4. So visibility, do we show a color? Let's use indigo. I like indigo. And then the placement. So we have button bar, navigation bar, and tab bar. Let's go for tab bar. And I actually placed this on the wrong position. You need to put this inside. So I add this now to my navigation stack, and the background color changes. If you go to the other one, it actually only uses this toolbar background color from my first view. You could have 2 different colors for them. I'm not really sure if you should. In order not to copy paste this, I'm just wrapping everything in a group, and then around the group, I'm adding the toolbar background. Now, if I go to the settings view, it's still not there. This is because this was the whole discussion of if you don't have content that fills the whole screen, the bar is actually not shown. And we can override this toolbar background by saying this is always visible for the tab bar. So even if I scroll down, now it stays there. And if I go to the settings, we also have the tab bar. Now as an additional gimmick, in this case, maybe I don't really like to use, I already said you can't customize all the colors. But one way of doing this, especially because I have here such a dark color, is to use the toolbar color scheme to light for tab bar. This is not using black and gray. I actually probably should do the inverse of dark. So now the selected one is white and the unselected is white opaque. We can also test this in dark mode. And in this case, it stays the same. This is because basically I override here the color scheme for the tab bar. I guess I'm happy with this. This looks kind of consistent. Now, the interesting thing about this toolbar background modifier is I used here always this for tab bar. And this same modifier you can use to customize the top bar. So let's just do this for my navigation stack, because in this case I have here something on the top. And I said toolbar for navigation bar, setting this to yellow. Again, it's not visible because you need to put it inside at some point. And then when I scroll up, this is the same. It only appears when there's overlaying content. So when I'm at the very top, it's hidden, and then scroll down, it starts to appear. Again, if you always want to have the background color, we have to set visible for navigation bar, and now it's always yellow. The last one where you can use the toolbar is if you have a bottom bar. I don't have this. I don't have this example. It doesn't really make sense in this case because I have the tab bar. But you can use a toolbar. Where is this in the home view? A toolbar item here. I added this in the default, which is the primary action. But you could also add a toolbar item in the bottom bar. Then it would be down here. And this modifier would then change that bottom bar. There's a lot of places where you can put things. Let's go back to the main example. You have now the possibility to change the background color of these 2 places. These are available for iOS 16. If you want to do this earlier, you need to reach down to UI kit by overwriting the default tab bar appearance. So in this case, I use the on appear. You can also use the initializer. It's probably better to do this only once. So maybe somewhere when you can also do this on launch and then set it for the whole application. Most of the time you have only one tab view. So you can say the UI tab bar appearance bar tint color is indigo. This is the background one. The background color is light gray. This is the one that I use here. Then I can change the color of the unselected item. So this gray is now because of here. If I change this to indigo, now the unselected one is indigo. Okay, maybe I go back to the dark gray. With UI kit, you have more controls, as you see. But this is normal. Usually they don't expose all of the customizations for SwiftUI. Another thing that you can't really customize is the behavior, how to animate between these different views. Right now they just switch them out. There's no animation here going on. Can't override this in SwiftUI. This is possible in UIKit. At least I haven't been aware of a possibility to do this in SwiftUI yet. As I said before, tab views are more typical in iOS apps, but there's also a very good use case on macOS, and that is for the settings view. For example, if you use the Xcode settings up here, this is actually a tab view. We can recreate this kind of styling, and I did prepare a small example here with 3 different tabs. So this is, again, I use the settings view for the first one. Then I have a text with account view and a third tab. So we just see how these 3 tabs look like on macOS in the settings view. And for this, I need to go to my main app and here add a settings, and where the content is the view that I just showed you. This is only available on macOS. I do here some checks. Now I can select Mac, the target, and we test this. There's a lot of things that are not possible. So I'm just going to add here if OS is iOS, hashtag end if. Every time, this is because tab bar, as you saw, as I explained you, it's not on the, it looks completely different. So they don't allow this. Same here as for this paging behavior. So my main view looks a little bit boring. I have here the tab bar on the top, and you don't see these icons. Now if I go to my project settings to open the settings view, the settings now, they automatically adjust this in this case to with the styling. So I have here my whole toolbar area. So they show the full label with the icon and text. When I switch here, the window name title changes. So I have here account title, tab 3 title, and settings title. This kind of styling they only use in the settings. I don't know how to do this in the normal ones. Additionally, in settings windows, you would use a form. This has this nice layout with the, for example, here this is a text field where the label of this text field is shown next to it. You won't get this layout with a list. You need to use a form for that. On iOS, there's not a lot of difference between form and list, but on macOS, this is the place where I should use a form. All of this styling you get automatically in the settings window. Okay, let's go back to iOS. And what I want to talk about now is programmatically changing the selected tab. And the reason why I need this is here for my onboarding screen, so that when I press here on this next button, I'm actually going to the next slide. For this, we need to modify our tab view access here and also use another argument, which is the selection. The autocompletion here gives me a number, so let's also use a number. I need to create a state property, add state private var selection as an integer, and I start with 0. Now I can use this here for my selection binding. Each of these views, each of these pages in my tab view, I want to associate with one number. Right now, the system doesn't really know this. And so we need to add here a tag to say, okay, this is my 0 screen. This is my 1 screen. And this is my second. I didn't really change anything. But for example, if you wanted to start off with a different screen than the first one in the tab view, let's say we start with the 1. You can just here change this to selection 1. And now when after the refreshes, you see we change to the first tab, to the second tab here. I go back to my 0 screen, and every time I want to now change the selection in my tab view, I can simply modify the state property here. This is what I want to do in the go next action. So every time I press here on this button, this closure is executed and this function is called. So I can say selection +1. Okay, let's try. I press next. And it moves. It doesn't animate it because I did not tell it to do this with an animation. So with animation. So now I try again. Modifying the selection to 1, modifying to 2. And now I set it to, I added 1 more and it jumps to the first one. It doesn't really make sense because I only have 3 tabs. So I should not add, if I am in the selected state of the last tab where it's 2, I don't want to do this. I want to actually leave my onboarding. So let's add a conditional check of if selection is smaller than 2, then I know I didn't finish yet. If I reach 2, then we need to leave here the onboarding. I already added a binding because the onboarding, if this onboarding is shown, is not defined by this view, it's by the parent view of this one. But once I reach the last one, I can just toggle this show onboarding to false. Now, in order to actually properly show you this to you, we need to use the onboarding somewhere in our main content. So I go in the content view. First of all, we, similar as before, need to have a state property for show onboarding. Let's say true. And we need to decide how to show this. One way is a sheet or a full screen cover. So let's use full screen cover, show onboarding, and then we show the onboarding view with the binding to this property. So this refreshes and then brings up the onboarding. Now I can say next. This is the programmatic moving on. On my last screen, actually I should show a different thing on my last screen. So I need to change here. This is the show done button is true. Try again. If I show this correctly. Okay, next, let's get started. In this case, I don't move on my selection. I said this case, I should actually toggle my show onboarding property here, which then should remove full screen cover. And it actually does. Now you don't need to use the full screen cover. We can also use a Z-stack. So Z-stack, and then actually maybe I should say if show onboarding else. So in case of onboarding, we show this one. And otherwise I show the tab view. Okay, try again. Next. Let's get started. And then it leaves. Now you saw I just removed it and I only added the animation for selecting it. So I'm going to move this one out. So everything is animated. When you do these kind of transitions, it sometimes doesn't work in the preview. So I need to run this in the simulator. Transition is when one view comes and the other one goes. So if I have, in one case, show one view, it leaves, it is there. And then if I go to the other one leaves and one comes. Next, get started. And maybe it was too not visible. So I'm going to use a transition of move to the bottom. Next. And now it moved down. Before I leave, right now I still have an issue because every time I launch my application, I only want to show this the first time, and we can do this with app storage. So in this case, I create a new show onboarding user defaults, which is a boolean, and I said in the beginning, when there's no user defaults, it's true, and we show this. And then once I went through this, once I set this one time to false at the end of my onboarding, the next time I launch it, this will be false and I won't show it again. You can test this the first time it's shown. Now I set it to false. You need to wait a second or at least close it properly. Otherwise, sometimes it doesn't save it directly in the user defaults. And when I launch again, my onboarding is not shown anymore. As you see, TabView is very convenient for these onboarding sequences. You can do all kinds of customization with this. If you want to know when a tab changes, for example, here in my onboarding, you can check when the selection changes. And we have the on change modifier. So selection, and here you get the selection, the new, every time the selection changes when you swipe or when you press the button. And this closure is executed and you can perform some actions. Selection change to new value. We can test this. So in the preview, I have to select here, in the debugger, I have to use here previews. And now when I move, you see the print statement, or when I press these buttons. You could use this, for example, to load some data from the server or to calculate something. I showed you quite a few examples for TabView. Other views that are in this category are Navigation Stack and Navigation View, which I used here for my first tab. If you want to learn more about Navigation Stack, I made a full video about all the different kind of navigation and how to use the navigation destination modifier now, how to create this navigation links. I will leave a link here. If you found this video helpful, please like and share. Until next time, happy coding.